Am I visible to all of you? Got it.
Yes, George.
Okay. Good morning, respected Father Gerald D'Souza, SJN Director, Principal Dr. Pratima Prabhakar, Vice Principal Ms. Pauline Priya, faculty members, fellow Josephites, and others who are here. Today, the world over UN Public Service Day is being commemorated, a day that recognizes and hails the value and virtue of public service to the community. For this webinar, we are truly honored that the Indian Institute of Public Administration, Karnataka Regional Branch, has joined hands with St. Joseph's College of Law, Bengaluru, to discuss and deliberate on the topic Citizen-Centric Administration. Now, before we begin with this webinar, let's join in prayer and offer gratitude for all those in public service. In these turbulent times, there is only one source of comfort, and that is the power above us. I now call upon Deeksha S. to lead us in prayer.
Where the mind is without fear, by Rabindranath Tagore. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments and narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into the ever-widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country away.
Okay, first things first, I request Mr. Thomas Alexander, sir, the faculty coordinator for this event, to deliver the welcome note speech.
Respected dignitaries, distinguished resource persons, and the inquisitive minds of the future leadership and service, a very good afternoon to you all. A customer is the most important visitor on our premises. He is not dependent on us. We are dependent on him. He is not an interruption in our work. He is the purpose of it. He is not an outsider in our business. He is part of it, said Mahatma Gandhi on the purpose of public administration. These words of Mahatma, embedded in our famous dictum, Janara Seviye, Janardana Seve, reiterates that any service of the public is indeed the service of the Almighty Himself. For in welfare of any part of the body lies the welfare of the whole body or the entire society, of which each of us is an inextricable part. Wouldn't we be an exemplary nation if each of us were to work with this attitude of service, where each of us are not counting on to receive in greed, but give in generosity? The United Nations Public Service Day is the celebration of this attitude, that we are richer when we give in service. And this can be best done by serving the people through the golden means of public administration. On this day, St. Joseph's College of Law is indeed elated to collaborate with the Indian Institute of Public Administration, Karnataka Regional Branch, to host this webinar. I deem it my privilege to welcome Mr. Surendranath Tripathi, the Director General, Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi, Dr. Jeevan Kumar, Secretary, Indian Institute of Public Administration, Karnataka Regional Branch, the convener of this webinar, and also the speaker, Dr. Gurucharan Gollerkeri, the chair, and Dr. Anitha V, the speaker of this webinar. I also heartily welcome Father Gerald D'Souza, SJ, the director of St. Joseph's College of Law, Dr. Pratima Prabhakar, the principal, Ms. Pauline Priya, the vice principal of the college, the faculty, and you, dear students and participants from both far and near. On behalf of St. Joseph's College of Law, I extend a hearty welcome to this webinar on the title Citizen-Centric Administration on the celebration of the United Nations Public Services Day 2021. George, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. As someone said, the show must go on. Not that this is a show, but I appreciate your efforts to be together virtually here. In today's gathering, we have amongst us august people who are here to enlighten us and give us insights into what lies ahead for budding lawyers like us in the domain of citizen-centric public administration. In the next couple of hours, we will all be regaled with first-hand experiences which will obviously go a long way in preparing us for the challenge ahead. I now request our very erudite director, Father Gerald D'Souza, to speak on behalf of the staff and students of St. Joseph's College of Law, Bangalore. Over to you, Father.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm extremely happy to take part in this webinar named Citizen-Centric Administration. Moreover, it is a collaborative venture of Indian Institute of Public Administration and St. Joseph's College of Law. As all of us are aware, we are amidst the crucial times. We are still in a pandemic, wondering when this will end and perhaps normal or a new normal will begin. At the same time, we are aware that leaderships are tested in this pandemic, and perhaps the administration and moreover the public administration is severely tested. How we can encounter a pandemic and a disaster, and how well we can manage, and perhaps all our strategies, our orientation, or perhaps intentions are put to test severely. Public administration, as we know, aims at addressing the issues. It largely includes sustenance of economic growth and promotion of social development. I want to highlight in my introductory note, two aspects perhaps we need to keep in mind today as we are reflecting on this very important and relevant issue. First of all, the Gandhiji said, developments needs to be measured, and when it reaches especially to the so-called least person in our society, only then we can say development is successful or perhaps it has achieved its end. Hence, we understand and we need to understand development needs to be the poor-centric, the marginalized centric, and those who are living in perhaps struggling to make a dignified living, perhaps I think that is very, very important. Otherwise, we can have a notion or perhaps concept of development entertaining or reaching only a few who belong to the privileged class. Secondly, we need to today be more conscious and be aware of the sustainable development. Development could be time-bound or timely and can look at only the present scenario, the problem and the context. But I think the future generation and future of our society or nation also equally to be kept in mind. Only when it is sustainable, then it can be more meaningful and perhaps more hopeful. With these, I think two notes, I would like to wish all the well to the speakers. Let this session be very informative, insightful, and inspiring at the same time. Secondly, I would expect this session would be more interactive so that we have time and an opportunity to share our ideas and learn from each other. I would like to thank here and acknowledge the initiative of all the office bearers of Indian Institute of Public Administration and also our staff, Mr. Thomas Alexander. Thank you very much for this initiative and thoughtfulness of having this kind of program today. And I wish all the well to all of you, and especially the participants, the students, and staff of our St. Joseph's College of Law. Once again, wish you all the well, and God bless us all.
Thank you so much, Father. All right. Our panelists for today are experts in their field. Let's begin with the chair first. It's over to Nikita S. to introduce the chair for today's webinar.
One second. Let's see if Director General, Mr. Tripathi, is here.
Right, sir. Yes.
Just see if he's here. If he's there, he'll make a few introductory remarks, then we'll begin.
Right, sir.
Can you see his name by any chance, George? Mr. Tripathi, are you with us?
So I cannot see his name, sir. I cannot, sir.
Okay, he's a very busy man. He said he would try to be with us.
Right, sir.
I presume Mr. Tripathi is preoccupied with other work, so we'll begin the webinar.
Understandably, sir. Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. All right. So let's now introduce the chair for today. Nikita, I request Nikita S. to please do the honors. Over to you, Nikita.
Thank you, George. Dr. Gurucharan Gollerkeri took over as the director of the Public Affairs Center, PAC Bengaluru, in February 2017. As the chief functionary, he provides strategic direction to the center in partnering governments, corporates, and civil society organizations. Prior to joining the PAC, he served in the Indian Administrative Service and retired as the secretary to the Government of India. He established the India Center for Migration, ICM, a policy think tank dedicated to international migration research, and served as its first director during 2010-2013. Based on his work in the ICM, he co-authored Migration Matters, Mobility in a Globalizing World, Oxford University Press, 2016. In 2004-2005, he was a visiting fellow at the Center for Public Policy at IIM Bengaluru. His research interests include migration and the application of data science to development. A warm welcome to you, sir. I request you to take over.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today in this very interesting webinar. Let me begin by thanking the IIPA and the St. Joseph's College of Law for inviting me to chair this important webinar. And on the occasion of the UN Public Service Day, it would be appropriate for all of us at the outset to pause to acknowledge the untiring efforts of the public servants, the health professionals, the security personnel, civic authorities, and various others who have been in the front line of the battle against COVID-19 in the last year and a half. A most difficult time for all of us, governments, private sector, and civil society organizations. I hope this webinar inspires some of you at least to join the public administration. And in this backdrop, let me welcome two of the distinguished experts who will be speaking in the webinar today. Dr. Jeevan Kumar. He needs little introduction, really. He's been a professor, very distinguished one at that. He also coordinates the IIPA Karnataka branch and has been in the forefront of a lot of intellectual activity that IIPA has been driving in partnership with various institutions. Similarly, Dr. Anitha, all of you know her, so let me welcome her as well. I really would like to give as much time as possible towards the end for question and answers, because we have a very large number of young students, all of whom constitute the future of this country, the future of public administration, the future of the course of development of India. And therefore, I'm going to restrict my opening comments to just set the context, provide a brief conceptual framework that the two speakers might like to focus on. First is to begin by saying that when we speak of citizen-centric administration, we often reduce it to a transactional process. And we discuss it in the narrow context of service delivery by government. But citizen-centric administration is much more than that. It diminishes the transformative power of the core concept of social accountability if we looked at citizen-centric administration merely as service delivery. So what does it really entail? When we speak of citizen-centric administration, it is predicated, and as lawyers or young budding lawyers, this will be of interest to you, on two fundamental principles. The first is the rule of law. That is, that citizen is equal under the law, regardless of his situation in life, his caste, creed, religion, language, or economic status. How to enforce the rule of law and ensure that everybody is provided an opportunity to participate in the governance process is central to the idea of citizen-centric administration. The second principle is that the citizen or the people as the creative source of authority. And again, as law students, you should be interested in knowing that in the kind of democracy that we live in and practice in India, we follow the agency system of government. Namely, the people represent the principals who elect the executive government, who represent the agents, who, on behalf of the people, perform several tasks. The second question that you should ponder is really, how do we use social accountability to hold the state to account? And this only works if we yoke the idea of representative government and civic participation together. There is, to my mind, no other pathway to fostering a shared identity between those who govern and those who are governed. So how do you use law
Sir, you have been muted, sir. Kindly unmute yourself.
Excuse me, sir. You have been muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, did you miss anything that I said? I was just saying that you must ask the question, how do you use social accountability to hold the state to account? And this only works if we yoke the idea of representative government and civic participation together. And there is no other path, to my mind, to fostering a shared identity of those who govern and those who are governed, except by using social accountability tools. And therefore, as lawyers, as young budding lawyers, the question you must ask is, how can I use law, the instrument of law, for development, for governance, and for citizen-centric administration? Essentially, I would say that this boils down to 3 or 4 fundamental questions as lawyers that you might ponder. First is, when the state is engaged in allocating scarce resources or enforcing contracts or assigning rights to public goods or common property resources, how does it go about doing it? How does it ensure a regulatory quality that makes it a citizen-centric process is one question that arises. The second question that arises is, how can we use law to institutionalize the process of citizen-centric government or citizen-centric administration by making legal the process of adopting standards, processes, templates which guarantee to the citizen certain of their rights as citizens who expect welfare and services from the government. So I'll end with 4 legal issues that you might like to ponder. One is the question of how in a citizen-centric administration we try to balance the roles and responsibilities of the state and the market, and in turn, how do we ensure that market failure doesn't occur or state failure does not occur? And what might be the role of law as an instrument in addressing this problem? Second is, how do we go about ensuring regulatory quality? And the third is, can we use law as an instrument that helps conflict resolution? Because when we speak of the citizen or the public, it's always a mistaken notion that it is one homogeneous group, but that's not quite the case. Political economy will tell you that there are groups within groups in the public, there are citizens within citizens, and therefore we have to tread carefully when we speak of citizen-centric services. Finally, the last question, how can you use law to ensure that those who are disadvantaged and vulnerable get what might be described as rights-based entitlements? I'll stop here, and with this backdrop, let me invite Dr. Anitha, the first speaker of the webinar, to make her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. So one of the speakers will be introducing Ms. Anitha before she starts on. Is that okay, sir?
Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. All right. Our first speaker for today is Dr. Anitha V. Michael Thomas will do the honors and introduce ma'am. Over to you, Michael. Dr. Anitha graduated with an MA from the Mysore University and received her PhD from the Institute for Social and Economic Change, which is affiliated to Mysore University. She is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at St. Joseph's College Autonomous, Bangalore. Her areas of interest include political theory, public administration, and public policy. Welcome aboard, ma'am.
Thank you. Will the PPT be streamed?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Respected dignitaries, participants and students who are present in this occasion, I'm extremely privileged to have this particular opportunity that is given to me by IIPA as well as from St. Joseph's College of Law to share my views on citizen-centric administration in this occasion of Union Public Service Day. So to start with, I have started with a quotation of Mahatma Gandhi, wherein we are talking about why citizens should be the focal point of administration. Because the very perception of administration about, governance in the governance structure is, the citizens cannot be taken for granted. When we are talking about the present governance structure, we should understand that citizen-centric administration means that people in administration having empathy with citizens in public policies and programs. So all the organs in governmental system are meant to serve to common citizen. In the long run, the smooth and peaceful survival of the society will depend upon this honesty, efficiency, and pro-people public administration which is given by the governmental mechanism. So the developmental goals of government may need to realize that there is a necessity for us to put the center or the focal point on the citizens. So the developmental goals of government may not realize without an effective delivery machinery of public service. There cannot be effectiveness in the governance structure. So therefore, there is a need to improve the quality of our public administration. Can you please change the slide? Second slide. Thomas, kindly put the second slide.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Michael, could we make Anitha ma'am the presenter herself? She can also change the slide.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, I've made you the presenter, ma'am.
Is my slides visible?
Not yet, ma'am.
Kindly give it a minute, ma'am. It will take time to upload.
Are you able to see my slide?
No, not yet.
Yeah, there is a disturbance. There is a disturbance. Not audible also.
Ms. Anitha, could we tell Michael to continue with the screen sharing?
Yeah.
Mr. Michael, kindly do so. And kindly keep track of the slide changes as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, kindly do it.
Very sorry. Very package. Very beautiful.
Slide 2, Michael.
Only previous one.
Dr. Anitha, may I suggest that you go ahead and make your presentation orally while we wait for the slides to upload?
Okay, sir.
In the interest of saving time, because otherwise we might lose a lot of time waiting for the slides.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. No issues.
That will be a good thing. That will be good.
Yeah. So I was telling, today citizens are concerned less with the convulsions of governance structures and are more concerned with obtaining rapid and equitable access to government service. Hence, there is a need to place the citizen at the center of modern public administration and make it more inclusive government. So this concept of citizen-centric administration is not new to us, because as per an ancient political thought, the essence and the basis of moral state depends on the triangle of those actions for governance which are undertaking for universal welfare, maintaining and protecting each and everyone in the creation and securing universal care for all. So the focal point of administration has always been the happiness for all. So in other words, I can say it as public good or common interest or common good. So this is also well reflected in Arthashastra of Kautilya. So he says, in happiness of his subjects lies his happiness, in their welfare his welfare. Whatever pleases himself he does not consider as good, but whatever pleases his subject he considers as good. So this very quotation of Kautilya so reflects that why citizens should be given so much of importance in the public administration. But today we are seeing some sort of shortcomings in the public administration. There are reasons also. So the reasons for governments not being citizen-centric are attributed to following factors. So the factors are indifferent attitude of public servants, lack of accountability, red tapeism, low levels of awareness of rights and duties of citizens, ineffective implementation of laws and rules. So in this context, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh stated, I quote, effective and efficient institutions form the backbone of a successful development and governance process. So the founding fathers had the foresight to create the necessary institutional framework which has brought us thus far. We need to think whether this framework is adequate in the years to come, whether past modes of functioning will address the demands of the future in the fast-changing world, whether skills and capabilities that were relevant in the past have outlived their utility. It is only by asking and answering these questions will we be able to identify institutional reforms which will meet the needs of our times. So this was said in Civil Service Day 2007. So with this actually signals as there are certain preconditions to be created for citizen-centric administration. So what are those preconditions that are necessary for making our administration more pro-people? So India has an elaborate legal framework and institutional structures underpinned in the constitution which articulate the vision of a welfare state and by implication provide for creation of citizen-centric governance structures. So the concepts of good governance and citizen-centric administration are intimately connected. Citizen centricity with the aim of ensuring welfare, citizens' welfare and citizen satisfaction is critical for any local, state or national government because the aim is to provide good governance. So the vision of our constitution is to create a welfare state and by implication provide for the creation of citizen-centric government. So citizen-centric administration envisages that governmental organizations should minimize the delay, maximize convenience to the citizens. So further, government should also define all services which are provided to citizens, set standards, perform to achieve those standards, evaluate the impact through an independent mechanism and continuous improvement based on monitoring, evaluation of results. So this calls for conditioning of the institutional environment with the following measures. So the measures are to have sound legal framework, robust institutional mechanism for proper implementation of the laws and making sure their effective functioning. So competent personnel and sound personnel management policies, right policies for decentralization, delegation and accountability, re-engineering the processes to make governance more citizen-centric. So keeping this particular framework in mind, there are many initiatives that are taken by the government in order to make it more and more citizen responsive, because the efficiency of governmental organization is best judged by the responsiveness to provide high quality service within a prescribed time. Both developed as well as developing countries are making efforts to redefine the role of the state and to reform the public administration. The globalization of our economy is heralding new and rapid changes, and it is calling for too much of, it is also pressurizing the public administration to respond more effectively to the citizens. So because citizens of today have access to private and non-profit segments in several public utility services. So this change is pushing the government to think seriously about the ways and means by reorganizing public service delivery systems around citizens. So the three cornerstones of citizen-oriented administration are fairness, accountability, and transparency in all endeavors in the public domain. So hence, the following initiatives are taken to make government to come closer to the citizens. So the first one is, as we all know, and we are also leveraging the facility of it, that is e-governance system. So adoption of ICT facility in all our governmental services, right to information that was enacted in the year 2005. Citizen charters is a public statement that defines the entitlement of the citizens to a specific service, the standards of the service, the conditions to meet the users, and the remedies that are available to the users in case if there is a non-compliance of the standards by the organization. So this creates more and more user awareness and make organization more and more accountable. Then we also have social auditing. So social auditing refers to the engagement of the stakeholders in measuring the achievement of the objectives of the governmental organization, especially those pertaining to the developmental goals. So the basic aim of this social auditing system is to have an understanding of an activity from the perspective of vast majority of the people in the society for whom this institutional system is designed and to improve upon it. So then we also have grievance redressal system. So we have CVC, state, local, Lokpal, and we also have special institutional mechanism like National Human Rights Commission, State Human Rights Commission, and we also have special institutional mechanism such as National Commission for Women, National Commission for SC, STs, Child Rights, National Consumer Dispute Redressal Mechanism, and National Minorities Commission, etc. So we also have, initiated single window system for delivery of the services to make it more and more convenient and also time saving for the citizens. And we also have Sevotam model, which is basically an improvisation of citizen charter, wherein we are talking about, giving some sort of recognition for the organization which are efficient in public delivery mechanism. Then ARC is also advocating 7-step model, but by bringing the citizen into center of administration, that is by defining all services, setting standards, norms of each service, developing the capabilities to meet the set standards, to perform the achieved standards, monitoring the performance, evaluating the impact, and continuous improvement. So all these are the initiatives that are taken up by the public administration system in order to make it more and more pro-people. So in spite of all these initiatives that are taken, we have we have a lot of research studies that have pointed out the shortcomings in each of these initiatives that are taken up by the government, and we are also seeing some sort of reforms in the administration to make it more and more conducive and more and more effective with respect to all these initiatives. So how do we enable citizen participation in administration? So citizen participation in governance, this embodies a shift in the development paradigm from citizens as passive recipients of the development to one that views them as active participants in the developmental process. So the concept of citizens' participation in governance is essentially based on the premise that citizens have the legitimate role in influencing the decision-making process, because ultimately these policies, programs, and all these schemes, they are going to affect the lives of them. So citizens' participation in governance is seen as a contributing factor to the healthy democracy because it enhances and improves the representative democratic system and make it more and more participatory. So that is the reason why ARC in its 12th report suggests certain forms, or it has conceptualized certain forms of participation, citizens' participation in governance. So they are citizens seeking information, citizens giving suggestions, maybe with a very small measure that just by having a suggestion box to the grievance mechanism and so on. So citizens demanding better service, citizens holding service providers more and more accountable. So active citizen participation in administrative decision-making system. So how do we make all these possible? So for this, we have a normative model that is advocated in the public administration, that is new public service approach. So as King and Stevers in the recent book, Government is Us, in the year 1998, they remind us government belongs to its citizens. Accordingly, public administrators should focus on the responsibility to serve and empower citizens as they manage public organization and implement the public policy. So in other words, with the citizens at the forefront, emphasis should not be placed either on steering or rowing the governmental boat, but rather building public institutions marked by integrity and responsiveness. So this new public service approach advocates certain important tenets or principles. So this has three important threads: the theories of democratic citizenships, models of community and civil society, organization humanism, and discourse theory. So these are the three ideological threads that underlie the new public service approach. So keeping these things in mind, so there are certain important principles that are advocated by new public service approach. The first one is serve rather than steer. So this particular perspective says that, so new public service approach calls today's public administration in the present context to seek solutions to the problems from the communities. So in this process, the role of the government is transformed from one of controlling to one of agenda setting. So bringing the proper players to the table, facilitating, negotiating, and trying to bring out the solutions to the public problems, and also conflict resolution. As our Gurucharan sir has already pointed out, conflict resolution, that is the most important responsibility of public administrators of today. Second is public interest is the aim, not the byproduct. So public administrators must contribute to building a collective shared notion of public interest. So public servant will have to take an active role in creating arenas in which citizens, through discourse, can articulate the shared values and develop that collective sense of public interest. So this is possible provided there will be some sort of place for each one of us to collaborate and also to talk freely, to express the voices, different voices, probably sometimes conflicting voices also, and trying to reach to a sort of consensus, and sometimes also to accommodate views and compromise certain views. And all this process will engage citizens in order to develop that shared interest or community interest. The third point is think strategically, act democratically. So this idea is not merely to establish just vision by just putting the citizen charters in the organization. So it is also not sufficient if they just implement the public policies and program from the perspective which they think it is appropriate. So rather than that, what is important is the involvement of civic or civilians or citizens in all the public policies and programs. So this develops some sort of civic leadership. Government can stimulate that sense of civic pride, civic responsibility, So the aim of this particular idea is to make sure government is more open, more accessible, and it is also responsive, and it is trying to operate to serve the interest of the citizenry. So then coming to the fourth point, serve citizens, not the customers. So new public service recognizes that the relationship between government and its citizen is not same as that between the business and its customers, what we see in private organization. In public sector, if you view the citizen as customer, it becomes a little problematic because government always has that, the bearing of fairness and treating the citizens with the perspective of equity. So these two important things, that is fairness and equity, plays a very important role in service delivery. So government must respond to the citizens broadly in legalistic sense. At the same time, they are also supposed to encourage more and more participation and engage the communities, and should encourage more and more people to fulfill their responsibility as citizens, and for government to be especially sensitive to the voices of the citizens. And coming to the fifth point, that is accountability. So accountability is not simple for public administrators, because public administration is accountable to complex constellation of institutions, standards, including public interest, statutory provisions, constitutional law, other agencies, other levels of government, media, professional. All these people will have a bearing on public health. So NPS, or new public service approach, recognizes this reality. So it says that this complexity of the responsibility, which is there on the shoulders of the public administrators, should be brought to the awareness of the citizens. So NPS demands that public administrators not to make the decisions alone. So rather make the decision through the process of dialogue, so that it empowers the citizen, and it also makes people or citizens to know about the problems that are confronted to the public administration. So public servants should make citizens know the conflicts and different parameters that are to be taken into consideration in the public administration while making the decision, and they should be made as active, partners in the whole process of decision making. So by doing so,
Dr. Anitha, 5 more minutes before you conclude.
Yes, sir. So doing so, they will be able to build that citizenship and accountability. And last but one point, that is value people, not just productivity. So here, public administration is all about managing through people. So the notion of shared leadership is very critical, because we are not only trying to provide opportunities for people to participate, but we are also taking into consideration the important role that is played by the staff, who are very much part of the organization. So here we are also trying to empower both from inside as well as from outside. So the goals, values, ideals of the organization should also be shared with the staff who are part of the organization. They should be recognized, their efforts should be recognized, their contribution should be recognized, and they should be treated with more and more respect, accommodation, and support should be given by the leaders. Because we are in new public service approach, we are also taking into consideration the transformation leadership. So we are grooming leaders, we are grooming our followers also. So this, by valuing people, by rendering mutual respect and support, so this will also encourage people or the staff who are part of the organization to render more and more effective support. And coming to the last point, so that is, when we are talking about the new public service approach, what is more important is value citizenship. So public service is about entrepreneurship. Accordingly, in NPS, the expectation is administrators to have that mindset that public programs, resources do not belong to them alone. They are the stewards, they are the conservators, they are the caretakers, they are the facilitators, they are the catalysts in this whole process. So they should get that community engagement. And what is first and the foremost important thing that the public administrators should know is They should know the resources that are possessed by the organization. They should also know what are the resources that they can leverage from the other organization with other sources of support and assistance. And by this, they can engage citizens, community more and more effectively. And public administrators should take the risk and leverage the opportunity that resides in the larger framework of the democratic citizenship. So because of all these things, so you will be able to public administrators basically will be able to do more and more valuable citizenship in the community. So thus we can conclude that NPS approach tries to make sure values such as efficiency, productivity should not be lost, but at the same time, efficiency and productivity is achieved in the larger context of democracy, community, balancing between self-interest and public interest by placing citizens at the center. So thus we can say NPS as a normative model seems to be more consistent with the values of citizen-centric administration and basic foundations of democracy. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Anitha, for that excellent presentation, giving a good overview of public service, public administration as it is, and what we could envisage for the future. Let me now invite Dr. Jeevan Kumar, man of many talents, not least a good understanding of political science, politics, and political economy. Dr. Jeevan Kumar, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, sir. It's indeed a pleasure to be part of a webinar where you are chairing the program. I have given a little subtitle to my presentation. I've called it Moving the Citizen from Periphery to Center, because the basic hypothesis behind my presentation is through all the developments that we have been seeing, both from the last century and in this century, my feeling is that the citizen continues to be at the periphery of administration. And therefore, I think that there is time, given the challenges that we are facing in this century, to move the citizen from the periphery to the center. I begin by talking about a term that is being increasingly used these days, not just in this country, but across the world, a term that is called trust deficit among the citizens in public administration. In fact, some of you may be familiar with what is called the trust barometer, which regularly once a year examines the level of trust citizens have with various institutions around them, and not necessarily only public administration or the government, also private sector and so on. And I'm referring to the latest trust barometer, which says that the trust deficit among citizens in public administration specifically seems to be increasing. And therefore, if this is a problem, then I think a little preliminary work may have to be done by us, which I've tried to do in trying to locate the citizen through landmarks in public administration theory and practice. I've tried to locate the citizen. Where exactly do we see the citizen in these landmarks? And those of us who have taught public administration would be familiar with these landmarks. For want of a better term, I'm referring to the traditional public administration as old public administration. In that scheme of things, where was the citizen located? Then we come to new public management towards the end of the last century. Across the world, we saw public administration changing a lot of its colors, and we came to read about new public management. And then, as Dr. Anitha very nicely pointed out, today we are talking about new public service. Now, in each of these three landmarks in public administration theory and practice, I've tried to see where do we locate the citizen. And at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is, I think we need to move the citizen from periphery to the center. Now, let me begin with the old public administration. We would all be familiar with Max Weber and how his influence on public administration continues for a good part of the 20th century, at least for a major part of the 20th century. And let's take a brief look at the distinctive features of old public administration. hierarchical organizational structure, centralized control, established rules and regulations, guidelines, and so on. All of these were distinctive features of traditional or the old public administration. And let's not forget that the objectives behind the old public administration were efficiency and effectiveness. At the end of the day, the public administration was being measured, was being evaluated in terms of these two very important objectives. How efficiently is the work being carried on? How effectively is the work being carried on? Now, if you ask the question, and this is what I try to do, where would one locate the citizen in old public administration? I have a few of my findings which I would like to place before this audience. I think in old public administration, citizens were related to the administration as public. You know, the public in public administration, the citizens fell into that particular category. This public, the citizens, were treated as passive recipients of top-down policy making. I won't elaborate for want of time, but I'm sure you'll get what I'm driving at. Citizens were viewed as end products of service delivery mechanisms. And therefore, control and hierarchy, rather than plurality, rather than engagement, characterize the relationship between public administration and the citizen. And this is how one saw the citizen in traditional or the old public administration. So what am I saying here? I think citizen was kind of forgotten. As my subtitle says, he was in the periphery, not that public administration forgot this term public, but by reducing the citizen to the public, citizens were treated as passive recipients of top-down policy making. They were the end products of service delivery mechanisms, and control and hierarchy, rather than plurality and engagement, characterize the relationship between public administration and the citizen. Now, that's the first of my arguments I'm placing before you. When we come to the era of new public management, which we saw happening in the 1980s, initially in the OECD countries, and subsequently across the world, we find the new public management concept having strong theoretical foundations in public choice, in what the economists were describing as public choice, in the principal agent theory, which Dr. Gurucharan referred to at the beginning. And here, the citizen came to be looked upon primarily as a consumer, primarily as a client, who has an important role to play in the market economy. Let's not forget that new public management is operating in a market economy. By then, India has gone in for a new economic policy, and the market has really opened up in a big way. Where do you locate the citizen? How do we look at the citizen as a consumer, as a client? And this can be problematic in viewing the citizen as a consumer or as a client. Then I come to new public service, which Anitha has referred to, which begins with the premise that the focus of public administration should be threefold. And I'm repeating this at the risk of repetition. I think this needs to be brought into our discussion this afternoon. That the focus of public administration should be 1, citizen, 2, community, 3, civil society. Okay, so the term citizenship or citizen has been broadened. Citizen is part of a community, and the community is part of civil society, and the focus of public administration should therefore be along these lines. Is there a theoretical foundation for NPS, new public service? There is democratic theory. The democratic theory says an active and involved citizenship plays a very important role in this scheme of things. And therefore, if citizen-centric administration is to be taken very seriously, and as my bottom line says, if the citizen is to be brought back to the center from the periphery to which he or she has been well pushed, thanks to traditional public administration and thanks to new public management, I think I have a short wish list which says that citizen-centric administration requires the following. There are 5 or 6 points, and I'll quickly run through these points. At the outset, I think we need a theoretical and policy framework that places citizens at the decision-making processes, move them from the periphery to the center. But to do this, I think we need a theoretical and policy framework. Does NPS give that? It tries to do that, but I'm not very, very sure whether it goes the entire way. apart from a sound theoretical framework, I think we need to also understand what citizens are expecting from governance, from administration. So my second prescription would be a sound understanding of citizens' expectations, an understanding of citizens' experiences, because they expect something from the government. Do we know exactly what the citizens expect from the government? Here again, the trust barometer, because it's an empirical kind of a study, gives us a lot of indicators as to be able to understand what the citizens are expecting from governance, from public administration. That's number two. Thirdly, we need to identify techniques that can help governments to deliver services to citizens in a more responsive and equitable manner. And this is where I think what Anitha has told us, a long list of techniques like social audit or citizen charters and so on, which have already been tried and tested. Perhaps we need to look at these techniques again. Perhaps we need to evaluate these techniques. Are they working well enough, and so on and so forth. So identification and evaluation of the current techniques that are passing off under the nomenclature of new public service or citizen-centric administration needs to be done. That's point number three. Point number four, and this is something which I believe very strongly in, collaborative relationships have to be built with citizens, community, and civil society by the government of the day. This, I think, is not happening. Each are operating in their own compartments, and therefore the building of collaborative relationships becomes very important. That's point number four in my wish list. Point number five speaks about fostering a shared understanding of public issues. Here again, I think we are not on the same page. The citizen and the government, I don't think, are on the same page as far as public issues are concerned. There are many problems there. We can go back into that later. But can there be mechanisms whereby we can collectively understand what the public issues are, and not just stopping at a shared understanding, going a step beyond that, and encouraging shared responsibilities in resolving these issues. This again, I think, is the need of the hour. We are not doing this enough. It's all done in a unidirectional fashion. The government needs to be done. Public administration implements what the government wants to be done. But where does the citizen come into the entire scheme of things? Look at the pandemic itself. I teach in the Rural Development University, and I'm familiar with the formation of the special COVID-19 task forces by the Gram Panchayats. Task forces by Gram Panchayats. But this again was a top-down initiative. They were told, Gram Panchayats were told, this is how you must organize the task forces. These are the responsibilities and so on and so forth. And then the task forces began to do their work, whether it is to sensitize the people or to promote vaccination or whatever. But then does this qualify as encouraging sharing of responsibilities with civil society so as to resolve the problem or to address the challenge of the pandemic? So the government directs and Gram Panchayats respond. I'm not very happy. My feedback I've got from the PDOs and so on tells me that it continues to be a top-down kind of an affair. And therefore my fifth point is, I think on public issues, we need to foster not just a shared understanding of the major challenges before us, but we also need to encourage sharing of responsibilities. And I think the enactments that we have, the laws that we have, is telling us that this can be done. The ward committees, disaster management cells, and so on. All of these may be there on paper, but my problem is, why are they not being taken seriously? And the pandemic is a good case study to understand whether these are happening or not. My last suggestion, and I'll end in a couple of points, Mr. Chairman, sir. I think these values in public administration, and these values are related to citizen-centric administration, I think are missing. I have a fairly long list of values. I'll just run through this list. I think we need to ensure that our administrators imbibe the following values. 1, responsiveness. 2, respect for human dignity. 3, trust. 4, belongingness. 5, empathy. 6, citizen service. And last but not the least, citizenship based on shared ideals. There are a few more values that one can identify here, but when you look at the administrator at work, when you look at the citizen before the administrator, I think it becomes obvious that these values are missing in the relationship of the administrator is the citizen. And therefore, citizen continues to be in the periphery, notwithstanding the rich literature that we have, which tells us this is the way in which things have to be done. But this is actually not happening. So if I may quickly run through this wish list of mine, to ensure citizen-centric administration, we need a theoretical and policy framework that places citizens at the heart of the entire process. We need a sound understanding of citizens' expectations. We need identification and evaluation of techniques that NPS has placed before us, listed by Dr. Anitha. We need to build collaborative relationships with citizens, community, and civil society. We need to foster a shared understanding of challenges, also encourage shared responsibilities in resolving those challenges. And we need to instill a whole lot of values in public administration to be really able to talk about citizen-centric administration. So my way of concluding observation, what am I saying? I think if one is to place citizens at the center of public administration, this requires a fundamental change in mindset on the part of public officials. There are notable exceptions, but then I'm generalizing, but then I may be forgiven because these exceptions are not helping to change public perceptions about locating the citizen in the entire governance scheme of things. So a fundamental change in mindset is required on the part of public admin. How do we do this? Well, training programs may perhaps go a long way. Orientation programs may perhaps go a long way. But we need to do much more. I think webinars like these, and I would like to listen to what the young minds have to say as far as the three presentations are concerned. We need to look at it more carefully and invite ideas to ensure that citizen-centric administration becomes a reality. I would like to end with a quotation, a favorite quotation of mine from a former distinguished public servant. Public service is far more important than an occupational category. I'm told that there are students in the St. Joseph's College of Law, Thomas tells me, they were interested in taking the civil service examination. And for those of them, I think this quotation would be very important. Public service is far more important than an occupational category. It can be better defined as an attitude, a sense of duty, yes, even a sense of public morality. So do our public servants have this? Are they aware of what distinguished former civil servants have been saying? I think if every civil servant takes this seriously, then it may be possible to bring back the citizen from where he or she is now, which is the periphery, to the center stage of governance. It is only then that we can claim to believe in the topic of this webinar, citizen-centric administration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, sir. I'm through.
Thank you, Dr. Jeevan Kumar. As always, brilliant presentation.
Dr.
We'll now open the floor for questions. I'm sure everybody is keen to participate. We're waiting for the students to raise questions. And Thomas, I'm not quite sure how you're going to deal with the questions. It's going to be hand over to you to moderate the questions and address it to the panelists. Thank you.
We have Mr. George who will be feeding us with the questions that is raised by the participants. So,
absolutely, sir. Yes.
Just kindly raise your volume, perhaps.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Is it better, sir?
Yeah, better.
All right, sir. So the thing is, sir, for all those of you who are attending this webinar through YouTube, you may pose your questions on the live stream chat there. One of our team members will take up the questions and will communicate the same to our panelists. And of course, for all those of you who are on Teams, please use the raise hand option before voicing your thoughts. And in case you're not even able to use that, you may put down your questions on the chat box. I will then definitely speak it out to the panelists and one of them could definitely answer it, if that's okay with everybody. All right, sir. We have got participants who have raised their hands, sir. Okay. Nikita, please unmute and ask your question.
Yes. Thank you, George. So I have two questions. One being, it's particularly to Jeevan, sir. Since you spoke about trust deficit, today we see that criticism isn't really taken constructively to a large extent. So when you try to, actively engage and try to move to the center, you're pushed back to the periphery by virtue of how things are really panning out in the country. So how exactly do you think this can be tackled? And my second question is, with respect to active citizenship being the core of citizen-centric administration. So, considering that education really plays a huge role in how we are socialized and in terms of the trust deficit as well, do you think that the new education policy can play a huge role in how citizenship is transformed in terms of in terms of the youth of the country?
Thank you, Nikita. Very deep questions, but Chairman sir, do we take each one or do we put them together and then respond?
I think it might be a good idea to take 3-4 questions at a time and then give it to the panelists to answer.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that, George, you collect 3 or 4 more questions and then we'll take them together.
All right, so noted. So, I guess then, participants could then just send in their questions in the chat box if that's okay with them.
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Jeevan, please go ahead.
Hello.
Sorry. You want me to respond, is it?
We can.
We'll take a few more questions.
I think we'll take a few more questions together. And then,
okay, sir. All right. Okay. Then, sir, all right. Neeraj, then please go ahead and ask your question.
Who's next?
Hello, sir. My name is Neeraj. Thank you, George.
Neeraj, okay.
So, now talking about public administration with relating it to the ongoing situation, which is the pandemic, how would you? What are your thoughts on the recent amendment in the vaccine administration, where the government provides free vaccine, takes 75% of the vaccine pile and distributes it for free and allows walk-in registration? And so, in your thought process, how would you? What are your thoughts on this? And is this a more effective system of administration of the vaccines compared to what it had been previously, where we had to manually book through COVID?
To whom is this question addressed, Neeraj?
It's not specifically addressed to anyone, so it's just a generic question.
Okay. Okay, fine. Thank you. Next, please.
Right. Sami, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, if I may propose this question to Dr. Anitha V. My question is, lack of many aspects result in low quality public administration. My question specifically is, how can we strive to achieve public service motivation in India?
Right. If the panelists have noted down the question, can I ask one more individual to please state his question?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir. Okay, you may go ahead, sir. I see you have unmuted yourself. Please ask your question.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Audible?
Yes, sir.
I'm Dr. B.S. Gurucharan, retired principal and professor of sociology. Now I am a IIP, Indian Institute of Public Administration, local branch, Gulbarga, honorary secretary. First of all, I compliment to the organizer on the view of United Nations Public Service Day 2021, because Anitha and Professor Jeevan Kumar, they have contributed wonderfully for the present situation. At the same time, citizen and scientific administration, there the administration at present in pandemic period, what the Karnataka government has played a role that would have been mentioned in their talk, that will be more better, what I feel. At the same time, our Secretary Professor Jeevan Kumar ji, collaborative public administration, that is wonderful. At this juncture, those are the things are very essential for the public service. So, rather than I have to be so many things to public administration, public service, and civil service things, there needs the social values. Value is more important place rather than the role play they are playing. So what I meant to say here is the public administration is more depend upon the citizens and the administrator. So both they have to be going hand in hand. That will be human service. So this few views of mine, grateful for this successful of this present webinar. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Jeevan, and the other panelists, can I take on 2-3 more questions before you proceed to answer them?
No, I think you could take this bunch of questions now. Perhaps Dr. Jeevan and Dr. Anitha can answer these questions, and then we can go for the second round.
All right, sir. Perfect.
Okay, sir. I'll try to answer Nikita's question because she said directly address that to me. I'm happy that she is conscious of the term that I use, trust deficit, and she pegged a question around that and has asked me specifically if the citizen is to be brought back to the center from the periphery, and that's what the trust barometers are telling us. What actually needs to be done? That was one question to which I think I've already given the answer. There's a fairly big wish list that I've drawn, starting from a theoretical framework as to how we can do things better, down to looking at techniques that the NPS is talking about. But the NPS techniques, to me, whether it's a social audit, whether it is social accountability mechanisms, or even citizen charters, I think somewhere down the line we seem to have missed the bus. The major problems, Nikita, if I may repeat very quickly, is the fact that I don't think we know exactly what citizen-centric administration is all about. Perhaps citizens are also equally to blame. Many writings tell us that we seem to have become so used to being the recipients of public service delivery that we refuse to even raise our voices or even protest or even tell the government exactly what is it that we need. So there's another kind of deficit here, another kind of a lag here in terms of a mismatch between what the administrator thinks the citizen wants and what the citizen actually wants. So we need to overcome the deficit, and perhaps youngsters like you can take up projects to be able to bring to the administration a better picture of what the citizens actually expect from them. But then my major argument is this: unless we are able to work collectively in order to understand what where the gap lies and how this deficit can actually be bridged, perhaps we'll still be talking about things like citizen-centric administration. Even the next time around UN Public Service Day, we may not still have been able to make much progress. Your second question, Nikita, about the new national education policy. I've gone through the document. It's not a very big document. There are, strengths. There are good points to be appreciated in that particular document. There are weak points too. It's not the place to go into all of them. But your direct question: does the NEP talk of shared citizenship? My immediate response, I'm sure some of my colleagues, particularly Professor M.K. Sridhar, would disagree. I don't find this term shared citizenship in the national education policy. It says a lot of very nice things, but it tries to, I think, reform the education system again from above. They may have done a lot of spade work. They seem to know exactly what the student wants or what the citizen wants. But then I think still this is a top-down kind of an affair. If shared citizenship is missing in the national education policy, I think the framers of the document have themselves to blame. I think it's good that young minds like you are raising these questions. How can this be brought into it? How can shared citizenship be brought into the classroom? I share your concerns. When people talk about some of these things, you, I think, brought this out that the academicians, the government doesn't appreciate students speaking their mind, students critiquing what the government is doing and so on. So I think there's need for a better dialogue. There is need for more openness. There is need for both sides to come together in a spirit of free and frank discussion to be able to understand how the concept of shared citizenship can be taken forward, either through the national education policy or even otherwise through concepts we're discussing here this afternoon about citizen-centric administration. Neeraj's question, Chairman Sir, I would rather pass. He was wanting a response to, a comparison between vaccine administration. How was it earlier? How is it now? And so on. I don't think I'm competent to speak about that. Regarding the question public service motivation, that has been addressed to Anitha. And Anitha, I know, has done a PhD on to do with public service motivation and so on. So she would be able to answer that question well. Dr. Gollerkeri, thank you for joining us. And I think basically what you have said is you appreciated the theme, you appreciated the role that we have done, bringing institutions together to be able to discuss these things. Thank you for your suggestion, Dr. Gollerkeri. And please, let's collaborate with you too. We want to know what's happening in Gulbarga institutions there and so on. You're the secretary. I'll be getting in touch with you to organize something with you on related aspects. Thank you.
Certainly. Welcome.
Yes, back to you. Yeah, back to you, Mr. Chairman, sir.
So all the best, sir. All the best.
Thank you. Do we have a second round of questions? George?
Yes, sir. So can I respond to the question that was asked?
Yes, Dr. Anitha, please go ahead.
Yeah. The question that was asked is, in spite of having so much of shortcomings with whatever initiative that the government has taken, how to motivate the public service. So I would like to make one point very clear. It is the people who can make a difference. It could be the incumbents of the position, or it could be people who are working with the civil society organization or community groups are the one who are able to make the difference. So today we need the leaders who are having the traits of transformation leadership, basically who are able to think out of the box, who are able to take the risk with, by risking their own position, power, and so on and so forth, with having the capacity to communicate very clearly without any fear or favor. So we cannot have one kind of training program which can bring in all these traits into the incumbents of the service, but definitely the giving training, keeping in mind these traits that are advocated by transformation leadership theory will definitely groom our public servants to serve better.
Thank you, Dr. Anitha. I just wanted to add a small element to that question as well as the answer. And that is for all of you young people to recognize that when we speak of government, we always seem to speak of it as an entity outside of ourselves, forgetting that those who are in government actually come from the same streams or same avenues of life as you and I share. Take your class of, say, law today in St. Joseph's. Many of you who graduate, some of you will join government, some of you will join the private sector, some of you will join civil society. And there should not be a time in the future when those of you who are in civil society point to those who are in government and say that, well, they are insensitive to our concerns or needs. That's not quite the case. So when we speak of motivation, we must recognize that the civil servants or public servants at the higher echelons come from backgrounds such as yourselves, and therefore are committed. They are also motivated. The real problem in public servants and public service is really at the last mile. When we come below the district level, at the sub-district level, you begin to see both capabilities, capacities, and motivation levels beginning to drop precipitously. And that's where we need to work much harder. The second point I wanted to make was, Neeraj had asked this question about some of the recent decisions on the vaccine rollout. While I'm not quite familiar with which particular instance he was referring to, I think all of you must recognize that every state as well as the Government of India, has constituted a COVID-19 task force that comprises experts from different fields. They are academics, they are professional healthcare, doctors and specialists. There are non-government organization representatives. For example, Dr. Giridhar Babu of PHFI is an important member of the Karnataka task force. Dr. Devi Shetty, who's a private doctor, is an important member of the task force, and so on. A lot of these decisions on how to respond to the pandemic is being taken by this collective, which comprises different representatives of civil society and government. And you must also remember that this is one of a kind that comes in a century after the Spanish flu. This is the pandemic that has overtaken the world and overwhelmed the healthcare system. So in many ways, when they make decisions, they are responding with whatever data is available at the time. And therefore, in a sense, they are engaging in action research. That is, whatever data is coming from the field is compelling them to make changes in their strategy as well. Now, this is the best I think they can do under these circumstances. There can't be a one-size-fits-all solution to the pandemic. I hope that in some ways at least addresses some of the questions or doubts that you had in mind. Okay, let's go to the next set of questions. George, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. All right. Before I ask Pramod to unmute himself, there are two questions from Ayush T. Question number one, how far can procedural legitimacy of policy decisions by consulting those affected help in securing successful implementation of public policies and reducing the trust deficit that people have in people at the helm of affairs? That's question number one. Question number two, the excessive overlap between implementation, program formulation, and policy making, which creates a tendency to focus on operational convenience rather than on public needs, and thus makes citizen-centric administration find itself in wilderness. How can we overcome this particular problem? Right, sir? And question number three, we had one particular question from the YouTube live chat. How can a citizen-centric administration be ensured in the current scenario of COVID-19 pandemic in India? I hope, Pramod, you may now please unmute and ask your question. Sorry for keeping you waiting.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Good afternoon, respected members of this webinar. My question is based on what Jeevan sir spoke and is also directed to him. I wanted to ask if we can reduce this trust deficit that you spoke about or speed in public administration if we had a more micro level management, a more decentralized form of power, as it can help it can help bring out the voices of those people because they're more comfortable with the ones they know, with the people who they know, the administrators they know. So is a more micro level management, form of micro level management, is that better, is what I wanted to ask.
Dr. Jeevan, you could take these questions. Most of them are addressed to you. So take them one by one. And then if Dr. Anitha wants to add anything to what you've said, you could do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you, Pramod. Thank you, Ayush, for those very perceptive questions. The response I would give to Pramod would be direct and straightforward. That is, again, with reference to the term that I used called trust deficit. And the suggestions that Pramod himself has made, the two suggestions that Pramod you have made in terms of could this be reduced, could this be overcome through micro-level management, decentralized administration, so on. Yes, definitely, Pramod, that's exactly how one expects the government to get things done, whether in a pandemic scenario or even otherwise. If studies are telling us that there is a gap between citizens' understanding perceptions of what the government is doing for them and from the other side, that there is this particular gap, I think the only way in which this gap could be bridged is by going lower and lower down to the level of the citizen. Dr. Gurucharan referred to the cutting edge of administration and how this is where reform needs to be addressed. I think it's important that those at the cutting edge, we're speaking about those who are directly interacting with the people. So if your term micro-level management includes these people at the cutting edge, I think that's very important, because if at that level they seem to lack something that requires to be able to take the people into confidence. I think we need to figure out how micro-level management or how decentralized administration would actually be able to deliver the goods. Here again, Pramod, let me quickly tell you, with my experience of rural development administration, many of these things are built into the existing system. For example, we talk about decentralized planning. We speak about Gram Sabhas, where the citizens in a village, in a Gram Panchayat jurisdiction are actually telling the Gram Panchayat officials, this is what we require. But then the problem is, in the process of decentralized planning, this planning moves from the micro to the meso level to the macro level. Finally, when these plans have been vetted by the people at the top and these programs are being implemented in the villages, where people have said this is what we want, villagers are shocked to note that none of the plans that they had suggested have actually seen the light of day. So what goes wrong where, I'm not very sure, because I'm not in administration. I can only guess. But if people's aspirations are not being taken seriously, somewhere down the line, I think we have reasons for this trust deficit. How it can be bridged, well, perhaps we can look at it on another occasion. But you are on the right track, Pramod. We need to look at it. Mechanisms are there, but they're not being operationalized. Well, where do the bottlenecks lie? Ayush asked a lot of questions, as he's used to asking. I'll take, I think, a couple of them. I was not able to quite get the first question, Ayush, but we can always interact since we are on a hotline together. Again, when you're speaking of, we speak to you in the classroom about policy formulation, policy implementation, and this new term that has been added to the dictionary called policy evaluation. Now, if all these things are done effectively, perhaps the administration would be in a better position to know scheme-wise, policy-wise, exactly what is missing where, and perhaps be able to take stock of the situation. So I think policy evaluation seems to be a neglected area here. So if you're able to add into policy evaluator mechanisms a better understanding of what the citizens actually want in terms of an existing policy or in terms of a policy revamp, reform, or even we don't like this, we want something else. If the people are saying this, I think it's important that administration takes this seriously. Both policy formulation, policy, and all the three aspects, I think are found wanting, according to my understanding. Policy formulation is not happening the way citizens would like that to be formulated. Policy implementation, again, there's a deficit. Policy evaluation is again not quite working. So you have your fingers on the problem. Each of these three areas need reform, and I think we need to understand that better. Another question of Ayush is about, in the current scenario, how do we ensure citizen-centric administration? As I said earlier, given the pandemic, look at the decisions that have been taken, and some of these things. I'm connected with an organization called Civic, and Civic goes to the High Court of Karnataka saying that at the ward level, what committees are to be constituted, where are the ward level committees? The Act provides for ward level committees, disaster management committees to be set up. Pandemic is very much a disaster. Why are they still not constituted? And it required Chief Justice Oka of the Karnataka High Court to tell the BBMP, when are you going to form these ward level decentralized committees? And still the BBMP is floundering. And when a deadline was given, thanks to the PIL filed by Civic, they say, okay, we will do it. And now we have a semblance of these ward committees. But in my ward, I'm still yet to know what's happening as far as committees are concerned. So people are waiting for these laws to be implemented. On paper, many of these things do exist. I'm not sure why the BBMP or the administration fight shy of getting these things in order. Of course, you can say that right now the BBMP, the elections have not taken place, therefore our councillors are not there and so on. But these citizen level initiatives where the government, where the BBMP involve the citizens, that can be brought into force. Despite the High Court prodding, I'm still not very sure whether these committees are in place. So we may have things on paper, we may have High Court judgments, but if the government is still dragging its feet, well, I'm not very sure whether I can answer the question, where does the problem actually lie? So I'm through, Mr. Chairman, sir. Perhaps Anitha may have something to say.
Dr. Anitha, do you want to add anything to any of the answers that Dr.
So with regard to the second question that was asked, gap between the policy formulation and policy implementation, I would like to just add on a point, a very small point, that is, when the policy is formulated, we see some sort of some sort of shortcomings with regard to the policy design. When the policy is basically designed at the top levels, so they won't be able to, or they are not considering the bottlenecks that are faced by the field agencies. And that is also one of the reasons why when it becomes a little problematic when the policies and programs and schemes to be implemented at the field level or at the state level. So if at all, if the policy formulation or policy design process takes into consideration the bottlenecks or the shortcomings or the problems that are faced by the field agency, probably they will be able to make more and more realistic policy design that is more conducive for policy implementation. And if we strengthen our monitoring and evaluation process, the monitoring and evaluation should go hand in hand. So if this is done very effectively, so probably we will be able to correct a lot of things that may go wrong, and rather than pondering what went wrong and so on after the completion of the policy or a program and so on. So if we have effective monitoring mechanism, we can make any policy program quite successful. So this is the point that I wanted to make.
Thank you, Dr. Anitha. So, George, if there are no questions, I will call a close to this excellent webinar. I'm not going to attempt to sum up or anything like that, because I think our two expert panelists have done an excellent job of elaborating on the basic principles as well as answering the questions. So not much remains to be said. So thank you all, and I'll hand over to George. Thank you.
Right, sir. So, do we conclude the open house session with that? Because we do have, 3 to 4 questions left, but I think with the paucity of time.
Oh, I didn't know. Sorry. If there are 3-4 questions, let's take them. We'll be happy to. I think the panelists will be happy to.
Thomas, sir, is it okay if we address at least 1 or 2 questions, considering the fact that
yes,
we're running short of time?
Ahead. Let's try to finish within 5 minutes.
Right, sir. Hope the panelists have taken note of that. All right. Okay. So we have one question from Trivikram Pai, who's attending this webinar via the YouTube live chat. The essence of citizen-centric administration is undoubtedly creating lawful and timely environment of fear and alert against default and or non-performance. Is it not time some more empathetic measures are taken now as such? Then again, we had one more question from Arnold. What are the most important aspects of citizen-centric administration missing pre-pandemic, and how can the civil service play a role in fixing this caveat during the pandemic effectively? Yes, sir, panelists. These are the 2 questions.
Who should answer these? Shall I pass them on to Anitha?
Well, I think Dr. Anitha can go first, and then Dr. Jeevan can top it up.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, with regard to making our public service alert, with regard to this, so what I can say is basically commitment in the administration is more important, and making them more and more socially accountable, so that can make our citizen-centric administration more and more effective. So with regard to the second question, I think I will pass it on to you, sir.
Okay, Dr. Jeevan.
Okay. Mr. Trivikram Pai, thank you for joining the webinar. He's a very distinguished life member of the IFPA. He stays in Karwar, I think, Umta, if I'm not wrong. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your question. I think you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Pai. Empathy is a very important value that we expect from our public servants. Of course, during the pandemic, given the constraints, given the challenges, a new disaster and all that, the responses, especially from the field, may not have been as empathetic as we think it is. But this is one term that I like very much, which I think needs to be added to the dictionary of public administration, especially in the context of citizen-centric administration. This value, I think, is exceedingly important I agree with you 100%. About the other question, the important aspects of citizen-centric administration during the pandemic, I'm not very sure whether a deep question like that could be answered in a short period of time. But let me throw the question back at you. I'm assuming the question is from the Joseph Law College. Why don't all of you put your heads together and give us a little, make a little study of what you think needs to be done better by the administration in terms of pandemic management, in terms of pandemic administration. As important members of civil society representing the student community, can you undertake a little project and tell us, since you understand CCA, citizen-centric administration, much better, where do you think the problem lies? Is the citizen during pandemic administration still in the periphery, as I've been using this term? Or would you say, if he's not in the periphery, where would you locate the citizen? And if you still agree, if you agree with me, what do you think needs to be done to bring the citizen back into the center of governance, of administration, especially in time of the pandemic? I am not going to answer the question, Chairman, sir, but I'd like the students to put their heads together and make a little study to tell us what they think is falling.
That's an excellent suggestion. That's an excellent suggestion, Dr. Jeevan Kumar. I'm sure the St. Joseph Law College Dean will take note of that and us put together a small team.
Yes,
any more questions, George, that you'd like the panelists to address?
Yes, sir. Just the last two questions, sir. There have been two people who have been waiting in the wings for quite some time to ask their questions. All right. Madhiya, you may unmute and ask your question. And Michael, you may do so after that. Both of you, please make it quick.
Hi, this is Madhiya. So any one of the panelists could answer the question. Can you talk about the effects of bureaucracy and political pressure on public administration and how it influences the citizen-centric administration?
Okay. And then the second question.
Yes, Michael, please unmute.
Good afternoon, sir. In fact, it's for both Dr. Gurucharan and Dr. Jeevan. So at a time when civil servants have restricted autonomy in decision making, how does one expect them to play a big role in promoting cooperative federalism with the current state of affairs, sir?
Could you repeat that quickly, Michael? Restricted autonomy?
Yes, sir.
Civil servants.
Yes, sir. With the current state of affairs, sir, civil servants actually have, a very restricted, they have restricted autonomy because they are controlled by their political masters. So how does one expect them to, play a big role in promoting cooperative federalism with the state of affairs that's there in our country, right?
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
Dr. Jeevan, if you could go first on.
Okay, so thank you. I've also noticed that Dr. Ravindra has joined us. Welcome, Dr. Ravindra. We may have to give him some time to at the end to perhaps make some of his own remarks. Madhiya, thank you. But then these, I think, are questions that go beyond my brief. What is the effect of bureaucracy? What's the effect of political pressure on public administration? How does it impact citizen-centric administration? That's a very deep question. In a minute or so, I don't think I would be in a position.
Dr. Jeevan, if I may, that question can best be addressed by Dr. Ravindra because he has been there, done it. So we'll give it to him later. Once you finish the second question.
Right. So the second question, cooperative federalism, is also a very deep question. If you don't mind, Michael, let's discuss this somewhat, because here we're looking at center-state relations. That's a bigger political science term that we're discussing here. Where does a civil servant come in the question, in the whole issue of cooperative federalism? I'm not very sure whether you got everything right. But let's sit together on another occasion and discuss exactly what your problem is. Is it cooperative federalism where the states seem to have got not as good a deal in pandemic administration as they would have liked to initially? They said, okay, you take care of this vaccine administration yourselves. Then under pressure, central government says we'll take over. So if you're looking at in the context of the pandemic, there's a lot that I could also bring to the table in terms of deficits in cooperative federalism. We could discuss the whole thing, I think, on another occasion. I'm not sure whether the chair or Dr. Ravindra would want to respond to this, but I'm just passing the buck here, sir. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we can invite Dr. Ravindra to make a few remarks in the context of the subject of the webinar, and perhaps address this question that Madhya had raised of, this whole question of bureaucratic autonomy, political pressure, and how this can be handled. Dr. Ravindra, sir, if you're there, I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gurucharan, but I must say that I have not come prepared to respond to any questions. I just joined pretty late, so I have not really listened to all the lectures given by the various panelists and all that. Except that I heard Dr. Jeevan Kumar is now saying about the citizen being placed at the periphery and it should be brought to the center. And so that, and also the questions relating to the autonomy of the bureaucracy, the political pressure, and so on. And this is really a vast subject which can't really be addressed in a short while. But just let me make a few observations. I mean, it's just offhand. Let me first say that I think to still assume that the citizen is at the periphery may not be right. I think he is not at the center either, and he is not fully placed at the center. But I think he is moving and somewhere in between, because the very pressure of civil society now, and there's so much of public debate on the question of public participation, making the citizens heard, and so on. For instance, the Right to Information Act itself, see, that has opened up a very large vistas for the participation of the citizens. That means you have brought him closer to the center, asking of questions. I mean, so today you can ask any question, and then and not only asking questions, but giving feedback. And there's a lot of feedback coming from the citizens. So there can be a lot of discussion on that. That's one aspect. Secondly, on the question of bureaucratic autonomy, see, this is again, one has to trace probably the history of the evolution of the bureaucracy and its role from the days of independence. Maybe I must say that initially the bureaucracy did enjoy considerable autonomy in post-independence in the 50s, 60s, and so on. Maybe from what I understand now, because now I cannot go by my experience in the last, let's say, nearly 2 decades, but things have changed quite a lot. Because the type of political leadership also, I think that we find a perceptible change. Those who came soon after independence, the freedom fighters and so on, and others who were, highly educated, and Sardar Patel himself, as the first Home Minister of India and Deputy Prime Minister, he stood by the autonomy of the bureaucracy. I don't think I need to repeat all that he said. He made a very famous speech in the Parliament itself, in the Constituent Assembly, saying that, we have to give, freedom to the civil servant to express his opinion. And if that is taken away, he said, I think the backbone of administration is not. So he did give that. I mean, he certainly defended the civil servants whenever needed. And they had absolute freedom to express opinion. And they did a lot of initial work, both in terms of putting the administration on very solid foundations, and later on in the development administration also. But of late, as I said, things seem to have changed, and where I think I don't say that political autonomy or bureaucratic autonomy is fully gone. No, not at all, because unless you know the inner workings of the administration, you will not be able to know this. Civil servants still a lot of scope to express his opinion, at least in a state like Karnataka, I would say. I mean, certainly he does express his opinion. It is given due consideration. It may not always be agreed to. And it is true. What we now see is a kind of a conflict between politics and bureaucracy. I think this needs expansion. I will not go into that. So whether they are constrained, I would say, and there are two views. One is certainly they are not constrained by and large in expressing their opinions and taking a stand. I mean, that also depends on the individual civil servant. So, and it is also true, maybe the politicians, the political leaders, have their own grievances about the bureaucrat, how he behaves, and that's more out of their own expectations. The political leaders' expectations of the bureaucracy have changed quite a lot. So I think this is an area that needs to be explored. I won't go into the details. Yeah, pressure, I mean, it depends on political pressure is always there in some form or the other, and it depends on what position one holds. If one is in a sensitive field work, like a deputy commissioner or a commissioner of a city corporation, etc., the pressures act. For instance, you saw that unfortunate, ugly episode, the battle between the two ladies in Mysore and all that followed. I mean, that perhaps that can become a case study. I would say, I mean, somebody here, St. Joseph's Law College or even IIT or somebody can take it up. I mean, how has this played out? And how did the government react? How did the politicians react? Politicians openly accusing the civil servants. And now they themselves going to the press, which was not so earlier. In our days, we never went to the express if we had any difference of opinion with the political leaders. So I think I'll stop here. Otherwise, time is important now in this case. And if there are any further questions,
thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that succinct presentation covering those issues. George, are there any more questions? Otherwise, perhaps we can close the webinar.
No, sir, we do not have any more questions. That was a wonderful open house. All of you answered the questions so meticulously and beautifully. I'm sure all the participants would definitely agree to that. Now, before we move on to the last segment of this program, I would like all the participants to kindly take note that there is a Google form that has been shared both on the Teams app as well as on the YouTube link. Please do fill that 15 minutes after you'll get 15 minutes to please fill that form after the event gets over. This will help us in clocking your attendance, and you'll also be eligible for participation certificates as well. Right? All right. Now moving on. No show is complete without a note of gratitude. Vijayashree will now propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, Vijayashree.
Thank you, George. So no one who achieves success does so without the help of others. The wise and confident acknowledge this help with gratitude. Wise words from Alfred North Whitehead can't be more apt for our day today. As our respected speakers who gave us insights and teachings that will help us grow and succeed, on behalf of the college, I would like to thank the chair, Dr. Gurucharan Gollerkeri, for gracing us with his presence today. And I would like to thank all our speakers for the day, Dr. Gurucharan Gollerkeri, Dr. Anitha V and Dr. D. Jeevan Kumar. It was truly a pleasure to have you here. I would also like to extend our gratitude to Dr. D. Jeevan Kumar for helping us convene the webinar. We're also elated to have collaborated with the Indian Institute of Public Administration, Karnataka Regional Branch. I would like to thank our director, Father Gerald D'Souza, SJ, Principal Dr. Pratima Prabhakar, and Vice Principal Ms. Pauline Priya for giving us the opportunity to conduct this webinar. I would like to thank our faculty coordinator, Mr. Thomas, for initiating and helping us make it a success. We would also like to extend our warm gratitude to Mr. Gio Verghese, Parikshit, and social media teams for helping us stream the webinar and make it accessible to everyone. Last but not the least, thanks to each one of you who could make it, because without you, as they say, you have to respect your audience. Without them, you're essentially standing alone, singing to yourself. On that note, I wish you all a great day ahead.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ravindra, for taking the time off.
No, I came only to listen to some views, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jeevan Kumar ji. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jeevan, sir. Thank you, Gurucharan.
Yes.
Anitha, madam, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Sorry for that inconvenience, ma'am, a little bit there.
No problem, sir. Thank you, Jeevan sir.
Thank you, Anitha. You did an excellent job. So much of academic inputs from you as usual.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye, sir. Thank you, Thomas, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. I thank all the participants who have been here patiently and have taken part. We wish to have more collaborations in future. Yes, sir. You wish to say something to me?